Hi everyone. In this video, I wanted to make a short guide on figuring out what to pick up in Path of Exile, how to figure out whether it's worth pricing, and then how to go ahead and price it and try to sell it. I find that the number one question I get asked, especially with the people that I play with, is this item worth selling? Is this item good? Is this item worth using? And a lot of the time the answer ends up being no, and I find it's because people have some misconceptions about what is worth picking up and what is worth trying to sell. So we're going to go through these sort of three steps, right? And the first one being how to figure out what you ought to pick up. And most of that comes down to your loot filter, right? So if you're playing this game for any amount of time, you probably already have a loot filter. If you don't, uh, there are other resources out there for figuring that out. The one problem though that I find with a lot of people is that their loot filters aren't strict enough. Most people have this underlying doubt that um, the loot filter is hiding things that are worth money, that they're missing out on something, that they're leaving behind all this currency worth of rares and stuff laying on the ground. And most of the time that isn't true, as long as your loot filter is set up appropriately. So in this map here, I just got finished killing, I don't know, this is a tier 14 I think, or tier 13 maybe, and my loot filter is just showing uh, a lot of the currency that dropped. I think this was just the delirium that sort of spit out a lot of this. But if we go and look at what another loot filter might look like, perhaps maybe like the semi-strict uh, never sync filter, which I know a lot of people use, you can see it. I mean, it's still showing things like Scrolls of Wisdom, which some people want to pick up scrolls, that's fine. It's also showing a lot of the rare items, right? So the belts, the rings, Hubris Circlet, and to be sure, some of these items are pretty good, right? They have the opportunity to be good, and so there's nothing wrong with picking those up. The only problem though is that you definitely don't want to be picking all of these rares up. Otherwise, you're going to be making multiple trips in and out of your map, and that's just not time efficient, right? It's much better to just pick up some of this currency and, leave behind these things that have maybe, right, any particular hubris circlet you pick up um, might have like a 1 in 50, 1 in 100 chance of being worth something to someone else. Now, if that is worth it to you, or you are dead set on doing the chaos recipe, or you just love the thrill of identifying items, by all means, keep your loot filter on whatever you have it on if it's serving its purpose for you. Um, the issue, though, is that if you're upset that, you're playing all the time, you're picking up all these items, you're not finding anything worth money, you might be better served leaving a lot of this stuff on the ground and just getting through more maps so you can just pick up stuff that's just currency or actually worth currency. So, put on if you look, very strict never sinks is pretty good. It's still going to show you, some of the better bases, which is good. And maybe we'll leave it here. Personally, for my own purposes, I hide all the rares. So I don't like picking them up. But let's go back to very strict, and let's go ahead and just pick these up. And we will use these to go through the process of figuring out, is this item worth pricing, and then the actual process of pricing it. Alright, we're back in our hideout with an inventory full of some rare items, and we're just going to go through the process of identifying them and trying to figure out, is this item worth pricing or is it just trash? Most of the time what that comes down to is life and resists. Early on in the game, especially if you're struggling with trying to figure out what is good, what is not, rule of thumb, if it's got high life, if it's got high resists, it's probably worth price checking. If it doesn't, unless the other mods look very good or interesting in some way, it's probably a piece of trash. So if we go through, this item doesn't have life or resists really, so this is just trash. This item, again, it has like a chunk of resists, and it's not a bad base, but without life, without anything else, it's garbage. With boots, you also definitely want to look for move speed, or at least that you could craft move speed on it. So here, I mean, we're of course missing the life, but um, it also doesn't have move speed or really good resist, so this is not very good either. Here's our Hubris Circlet, and it has a decent life roll, and it's got some resists, but again, they're just not high enough, right? Beyond the first couple days of a league, people are not usually going to be paying any sort of meaningful currency for a piece that doesn't have exceedingly good rolls. So with energy shield bases like Conjurer's Boots or Hubris Circlet, you also want to take into consideration that if the piece has a high flat energy shield roll and a high percentage flat or percentage energy shield, or has the opportunity to craft the other one, it also might be worth something. Again, energy shield bases can be a little more complicated. For our general purposes though, does it have life? Does it have ES? Um, and then again, does it have resist? Does it have move speed? No. And so we're just going to toss it. Here, we do have some life, but it's low. We have high cold resists, but no move speed. Probably not worth anything to anybody. And our last item, still no go, right? So even picking up all of uh, these were, what, the only 7 items that sort of were kicked out at the end of that map that were worth picking up, and all of them are just going to go to the vendor. Now, it is possible that, a couple alts and some alch shards are worth it to you, right? You get to go through the process of identifying some items, and if you are struggling with pricing items, it can be very helpful to go through this process of continually identifying and trying to figure out, is this good, so that you can learn. But eventually, you'll start to notice a pattern, which is that most rares just end up being junk. So if it's, again, if it's worth it to you, if you like that process, stick with it. If you're just trying to make currency, if you feel like you're poor and everyone is flying ahead of you in terms of wealth, it might be that you're spending too long identifying items and, trying to sell trash. So after we weren't able to find any usable rares in that first inventory, I went back, ran a couple maps, filled up a tab with some items that the loot filter was telling me to pick up, went through, ID'd them, more of the same process, and it was these 5 items that kind of caught my eye. And let's go over these items to see, well, what was it about them that made them stand out. So this first ring here, this 2-stone ring, already 2-stone rings are good. They have resists on them. This one has more life, more resists, and it also has energy shield, strength, and accuracy, which aren't dead mods, right? There could be someone who needs accuracy, who needs a little bit more strength, someone who's hybrid who wants both energy shield and life. So this ring definitely has some potential. It also has 5 mods on it, which means it can have another mod crafted on it. So if you're looking at an item and it seems borderline, is this good, is this not, chances are if it has 6 mods, it's not good. If it only has 5, it has the opportunity to have another mod crafted onto it, and so it might be a little better and might actually get past that breaking point of being worth selling. The second ring here also has a decent life roll. It's got some resists on it, but the thing that stood out to me was this non-channeling skills have -6 to total mana cost. So if you hold down Alt, you can look specifically at what the prefixes and suffixes are, and we can see that that prefix is Zopex, which is one of the temple mods, and these tend to be a little weird and wonky, and it's hard to know exactly which ones are good and which ones aren't. But again, if something like this catches your eye, it might be worth price checking, so I pulled this one aside. This base, the stats don't really mean much to me, right? There isn't any resist, there's no meaningful life roll or damage mods on it, but the base is a marble amulet, and if we, again, hold down Alt, we can see the item level is 82. So an 82 marble amulet, I don't think it's going to be worth much, but if you do see some of these unique bases at a high item level, they might be worth price checking, just to see. And here we just have a belt. Again, it's got space to have something crafted onto it, so seeing that it has a high life roll and at least one good resist, maybe it's worth price checking. This one, to me, it would probably just be trash, but it could be worth seeing whether or not it's worth selling. And this last one, also pretty borderline, but it's got 2 decent resist rolls. It's got some flat movement speed, and it's got open space to craft on. So if we slap life on this, maybe somebody wants this. But chances are this one's also not that great. So all in all, what do we have? Right, filling this whole tab up, only 5 items come out of this that are worth even price checking, and of those 5, I have my doubts about a majority of them. Alright, so out of all those items, we've got these 3 here that I have now decided I want to price check. So let's just go through the process of figuring out, well, what is this thing worth and what can I price it at so that it'll sell within a meaningful amount of time. So the first thing you want is some sort of tool for checking the price. Now you could use the Path of Exile trade website, which is a great resource. I would recommend using POE TradeMacro, which is a third-party program, and I know it can be a little daunting to pick up one of those, but it just makes life so much more efficient. So with just a quick keyboard shortcut, it pulls up a window that allows me to search the parameters of any given item. So in this case, maybe we're just interested in other rings that have a similar life, similar resists. I tend to not put the max in just because I want to compare it to the greatest scope of items. And maybe the energy shield. All right, so we want to know, what is this thing worth to someone who's looking for hybrid stats and a bunch of resists. And it comes back at about 1 chaos, 2 chaos, 3 chaos. So good news is we've picked up an item that isn't complete garbage. It might be that this item is worth a little bit more to somebody because it does have an open prefix. Um, but again, you know, the more narrow your search terms, the the less results you're going to get and the less meaningful results you're going to get, right? So, you know, if I wanted to, I could be very strict about my search terms. I could say I want a ring that has this much life, this much res. I also think the accuracy is important and the strength and the energy shield. And now all those things might be meaningful to one, maybe two people on the server. And if they happen to be searching for it, well then great, maybe they'll have to pay an exalt. But if you put this ring in there for an exalt, I can tell you right now it's not going to sell, right? Especially those rings that are showing up for exalts, they probably also have other meaningful stats on them. They might be shaped, they might have who knows what, right? Um, our ring here is probably in like the 1 to 3 chaos range, I would say. This next one. So this marble amulet, I wanted to check. So I don't really care about any of the mods. I just care, well, what is so use item base, what is a marble amulet going for that has an eye level at least 82? And it looks like it's worth about a chaos. And there's definitely no wiggle room here, right? There's nothing special about our marble amulet that makes it better than the other ones. So, you know, this might be worth 1 chaos. And so we might throw this into a chaos tab, and that would be fine. Now let's look at this last one. I have no idea what's going to happen here because I've actually never tried to price a non-channeling skills have minus cost to mana. So we'll go ahead and tick that. And my immediate impulse is to just search that and see what the cheapest ring out there with that mod on is going for. And it's taking a little bit. 1 alch. Okay, so there are times where it makes sense to just search one mod. There are certain mods that are worth a ton, just because they're extremely rare or hard to roll. But this one is not one of them. But our ring isn't just trash, right? It has that mod alongside a decent life roll, a couple of resists, and we'll start there. So still 1 chaos, 2 chaos. It is possible that, again, if someone were particularly looking for the life, the mana, and the minus cost, if they were looking for lightning damage to attacks or they needed intelligence, our ring might be worth a bit of a premium to them. But all in all, this sounds like something that I could probably maybe list at 3C and just see if somebody picks it up eventually. Lastly, we can just go through this process one more time with the actual trade website. There are definitely pros and cons to it. The big con being that just it takes a long time, right? You have to tab out of your game, go to the website, and let's see here, we're looking for a ring that has a decent amount of life. So 70 to life, 35 to energy shield, and we'll just go with pseudo res, something like 40. Alright, so this is a pretty good stat distribution that'll capture rings that are similar to ours. again, right, ours had some special things going on, but this will at least, when we search, we'll get to see some comparable rings. Okay, and we can see that there are some sort of comparable rings to ours going for, you know, next to nothing. A chaos, an elk. Again, this is the kind of item we could throw into, into a tab for a chaos or two, and it would probably sell eventually. But you can see that there isn't really a high premium on a ring that just has some life, energy shield, and resists. So again, the pros to this are that you actually get to look at the full item. You can see how long they've been listed, right? Sometimes you see items have been listed for days and days, and you think, okay, my item's probably not going to sell. Um, you also get to see, right, certain items that are, a corrupted item like here. It's not a great comparison for our own item because, our own item can be crafted on and it has a meaningful implicit. So there are pros and cons, but again, having to tab out, having to go through that whole process can just slow you down even more, especially for an item like this. Uh, Once you get in the habit of price checking items, you'll be able to sort of look at an item like this and say, oh, this one definitely falls in that sort of 1 chaos, 2 chaos range. I'll be happy if I can get 1 chaos for it, so I'll just throw it into my tab and be done with it. If you have any questions, just leave them below, but I hope this was helpful for some of you. It is good to just have a good loot filter, making sure that you're just picking up things that you want to be picking up, things that you think have value, finding a way to meaningfully evaluate these items quickly, which ones are trash, which ones aren't, and then going through the price checking process to make sure that you're not overvaluing or undervaluing your items. So, hope that was helpful, and I'll see you next time.